Well, the pontiff begins Holy Week by breaking from tradition and delivering an off-the-cuff message to the Catholic faithful. Are the Pope's more inclusive ways rubbing off on the Catholic Church and its followers around the world? And Democratic Congressman, in fact, Long Island's own Steve Israel, he takes a swing at the GOP. Some say he pulled out the race card and should have kept it in his pocket. Others say he was just telling the truth. We asked tonight if he crossed the line. And high school students in Oregon protest the National Day of Silence by wearing anti-gay T-shirts to school. Students reprimanded, and the question is, where does free speech start and stop when it comes to student expression? Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. All that and much more here tonight. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us this Monday evening, April 14th. Now, just 1 week after the Civil Rights Summit in Austin, Texas got underway, and race once again rising to the surface in the political arena. New York Democratic Congressman and DCCC Chair Steve Israel making headlines for taking what some would argue is a stab at the GOP on CNN's State of the Union this weekend.
Do you think your Republican colleagues are racist?
Not all of them, no, of course not. But to a significant extent, the Republican base does have elements that are animated by racism.
Now, the congressman was responding to the reason why he believes Congress is blocking a vote on the immigration overhaul. Now, some Republicans, like, well, Donald Trump takes no chance here to ever miss a chance to get in front of a camera. He said that, in fact, Mr. Israel was playing the race card on Fox and Friends. Trump called Israel's comment a rough statement and said he was out of line. You have to trust me on that one. Now, some say that Israel was, in fact, though, just saying it the way it really is. Recently, there have been many examples of how you've certainly seen some racial undertones being mentioned here in the news headlines. You remember last week here in New York, Attorney General Eric Holder, he went before Al Sharpton's National Action Network and spoke about how he was mistreated by a House committee.
Even in the face of unprecedented, unwarranted, ugly, and divisive adversity. And if you don't believe that, you look at the way, and forget about me, You look at the way the Attorney General of the United States was treated yesterday by a House committee. Had nothing to do with me. Forget that. What Attorney General has ever had to deal with that kind of treatment? Right. What president has ever had to deal with that kind of treatment?
So is there a different standard for the president and the Attorney General because of the color of their skin? Now, Holder, he was referring to a House Judiciary Oversight Committee hearing that got heated last week, and Holder engaged in a testy exchange with Representative Louis Gohmert of Texas and also Congressman Blake Farenthold. Now, the controversial voter ID laws across the country, they got a lot of Republican support, and they've also been deemed racist by the NAACP and other civil rights groups. In February, Joe Biden agreed the laws are one example of lingering racism and hatred. Now, other issues that come to mind here, Farm Bill and proposal to bring deep cuts to the nation's food stamp program. Another move by the GOP that's been deemed racially targeted by some, and some say stand your ground laws, also an extension of GOP policy. All right. So you know all that as a backdrop here, and oh yeah, it is an election year. I want to bring in our panel right now to weigh in, and we're joined by Dominic Carter, of course, political journalist and author. We'll see if he has an opinion on this subject. Jeannie Zaino, professor of political science at Iona College, professor of campaign management at NYU, and of course a great friend to the show, and another great friend and somebody I ran into at a tire store this weekend, Chris Shays, former Republican congressman from the great state of Connecticut. Welcome all. Thank you. Okay.
I can't stand it. I just can't stand it. You're saying that President Clinton was treated well? No, he was white. You're saying that George Bush was treated well? No. You're saying Barack Obama was treated well? No. With all due respect, Eric Holder, he's had his problems too, partly because of what he's done. And I happen to know, and you know, other attorney generals before were treated very badly as well. Welcome to the world of politics. But when you start using the race card, what it says to me is you don't want to talk about the issues, you just want to, malign someone.
Well, I want to get into the issue in a second, but Dominic, you've made a point in this program for the last few years here, that this president, and I guess as an extension as Attorney General, have been treated differently because they don't look like any of their predecessors.
They've been treated very differently. And as you know, I have a great deal of respect for the congressman, but on this one, we just see it differently. There's one thing if you're treated like everyone else, but I never saw Attorney General Gonzalez disrespected in the way that this Attorney General is, and that's a point that he makes. I said on this very program about a year ago that the race card is well in effect and that President Obama can never come out and tell the truth about how he feels, because the moment that he does, they got you. You're an angry black man.
But how do you respond to the argument, for example, Dominic, that some say, oh, look at all the golf that this president plays, and some in the administration see that as veiled? They said the same thing, you know, that look at all the vacation time that President Bush takes. Is it the same thing, except it's different people saying it?
Because golf is something that's rather simplistic. Look at what this Congress has done in terms of opposition to this president. They knee-jerk him and kneecap him on just about everything there is. They are determined that he will not have a lasting legacy that's going to portray him in a positive light.
Is there
and I'm
a
referring to
legitimate
the
point
members
to
of the
that,
House.
Jeannie, on, remember the whole birther thing, that he wasn't legitimate, he wasn't, I mean, what other presidents had to prove his citizenship or legitimacy? Then there were all the, remember when the guy screams, "You lie," in the middle of a State of the Union? We hadn't seen that before. Do you chalk that up to, you know, hey, we become coarser and coarser here with each year on the calendar, or is it different because this guy's different? Different name, looks different.
I mean, to Congressman Shea's point, if you go back to somebody like Janet Reno, and she was treated very, very badly, and you think about the gender issues related to that. Also, there was a political, you know, mindset there. But one thing that has struck me in looking at this issue is I've been talking recently, a lot of all people, of Lee Atwater, and part of this is rooted in the former Republican, and also a Republican strategist, you know, one of the most controversial in history. And part of what is difficult for Republicans to get out of this box is that Southern strategy was real. He said it, it was real, and it's hard to distance yourself from that once you get into that trap. So, you know, there's truth, I think, on both sides. I agree with the congressman. This is politics. All presidents are treated badly. Unfortunately, all attorney generals are treated badly, particularly from the other side. By the same token, there is some truth to the race issue as it pertains to Republicans as you move into the
issues.
So
Let's
look
do
at
the
the
start with
issue.
voter ID, because
No, it's voter ID.
yeah.
So you have to have a photo when you want to shop. You have to have a photo when you want to ride an airplane. But in the most important thing that you want to secure, you don't need to have a voter ID when you vote. I mean, to me, it seems so logical. So am I racist because I believe that?
Of course you're not racist,
Of course I'm not.
Congressman.
Of course
you're
I'm not. And so that's what I believe. I believe it's very precious,
But
and you need
Congressman-
to protect the fraud.
But Congressman,
What?
But some of the folks in Congress, unfortunately, they are not like you. Why in the world would Republicans want to block voting on Sunday? What's wrong with that? You and I know what's wrong with that, because black congregations go to church and the pastor may whip up the masses, and those are mostly Democratic votes that are turned out by the thousands.
But can I just say, though, and I agree, that's why they want to block it, but this has, I think, more to do with power, getting power and retaining it, than it does on its face to do with race or gender or other issues. But that certainly is used as a tactic on all sides.
Yeah, but when
it's
you-
absolutely used on all
When
sides.
you use the tactic of calling someone racist, you are racist yourself by saying it.
You know what it is?
I wouldn't say Steve Israel is racist. I mean, I wouldn't.
When you do that, you're using a racist
I
tactic.
mean, my hearing of what he said was that race has played an issue in the treatment. How do you divorce that from anybody? It's just like saying gender doesn't play a role when you're talking.
Well, you know what I don't like
speaking.
though?
I agree with you, but I'm saying.
No, but agree with me, and then not dealing with the issue, at least as I see it. When you call someone a racist, you're not dealing with the issue. Let's just take immigration. People are here illegally. They're not undocumented workers. They are here illegally. The responsibility of your government is to protect its borders. So what do I say to my constituents who say, there are people waiting in line. I have family members waiting in line, and someone comes here illegally, and we're going to make them legal? Now, what did the president say on health care? He said undocumented workers wouldn't get health care. What did he do? 2 weeks later, he said, you need to be documented. So, I mean, yeah, while they're undocumented, they won't get it, but he wants to document it, and then they'll get health care. So when he says they won't get health care, they will get health care. So I wish he hadn't said you're lying. I think that was inappropriate. But he's saying what you're saying isn't truthful in the end because they're going to get it and you're going to give it to them.
And can I just say to the previous point about power, why are we talking about equal pay for women right now? Why are we talking about the issue? We're talking about because it's an election in November. This is about power on all sides. So I do agree to that extent. You cannot divorce that. The Democrats are just as guilty of wanting power as they should as Republicans.
It's funny. When I heard the comment, and I knew our schedule for this week, and I'm not saying because he's here. We have other guests on the Republican side, and people always say to me, why do you pick always the sane ones, right? Why don't you have the Louis Gohmerts on the air and stuff? I'm like, because you can't really have a conversation with them. I would be offended that somebody would put the Congress or many other Republicans I know in that bucket. And while
I would as well.
Right. And while Steve Israel tried to have a caveat to say not all of them, but enough, there's guilt by association because it comes with. However, so many of the issues, and there's a political tactic to it, are saying, wait a minute. Brown people, black people, women, look, they're being marginalized by all these proposed policies either on the state level or on the federal level. Who does minimum wage laws impact the most here? Primarily people on the bottom of the economic spectrum and disproportionately represented here by people of color. How about when you're talking about stuff like, you can go up and down the line. You know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, I do. But, I almost wanted to scream when you said deep cuts to food stamps. That's baloney. They're slowing the growth of the increase. Food stamps are $90 billion now. Farm aid is about $20 billion. It used to be we had farm aid. We didn't have food stamps. And now food stamps are like 5 times what farm aid is, and we shouldn't be concerned about it, and it keeps growing and growing and growing.
But you do, listen, there's a conscious decision that's made here. Everybody plays to different constituencies. And we deal in the world of optics in this business. The optics reflected by every single poll and every single election show that the base of the GOP is becoming more and more whiter, and the base of the Democratic Party is becoming more and more diverse. And it's not just because, somebody says, Eric Holder says something or Steve Israel says something on Meet the Press. Some of this is policy stuff.
Right, but we don't have debate anymore. We don't talk about meaningful things anymore. Let's have a debate about food stamps, but don't say it's a drastic cut when it keeps going up and up and up, and Republicans are just saying it can't go up so fast.